It is understandably difficult for people to see the positive impact that tourism can have on a community that has just experienced a disaster. To truly understand these impacts, we must first define three keywords: tourism, disaster, and disaster tourism. Tourism can be defined as the commercial organization and operation of vacations and visits to places of interest, basically meaning the business of getting you to visit a certain location. Some examples of these tourist destinations include Disney World in Orlando, Florida, Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Louisiana, or any tour bus in any city that you happen to be visiting. The second term we must understand is disaster. A disaster can be defined as an occurrence that has resulted in property damage, deaths, and/or injuries to a community. There are three types of disasters that can happen. First are man-made disasters, which include terrorist attacks like the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, and nuclear power plant failures like Chernobyl. There are also natural disasters, which include Hurricane Katrina, which ravaged the Gulf Coast, and Mount St. Helens. Finally, there are biological disasters, which include cholera and Ebola, the epidemics that ravaged worldwide. The third and final term that we must understand is disaster tourism. Disaster tourism is tourism directed to places that are identified with death and dying. Some examples of these disaster tourist sites are post-Katrina New Orleans, Mount St. Helens, and Chernobyl. As I said before, it can be difficult to see the positive impacts that tourism can have on a community after a disaster. Here are three, however. First, disaster tourism can provide a quicker economic recovery. According to researcher Nayuki Nagai, disaster tourism can be used as a social tool that provides a platform for economic activities that can have a positive impact on income flows into the community. It can also have educational benefits. Disaster tourism can develop a relationship between the locals, volunteers, and tourists in the recovery effort. Tourism facilities can also be used as shelter or base for victims. Some examples of how disaster tourism can help economically recover a community can be highlighted in the Katrina Tours of New Orleans. The Katrina Tours of New Orleans was created by Miss Jennifer Day Sully. Miss Jennifer Day Sully would pack a bus full of tourists and shuttle them around New Orleans to see all the disaster sites and all the victims. Now, for some this might seem macabre and a little offensive, but to others, Miss Day Sully was a hero. Not only was she able to provide jobs to her old employees who were displaced from their homes and lost all their belongings, she was able to recruit and give jobs to other victims and other citizens who were also displaced and had also lost their belongings during the hurricane. Now in New York City, we saw some economic growth in the areas surrounding the World Trade Center. This can be attributed to the monument that was built around there, showing an increase in the tourism economy. Specifically, in 2001, there was only 6 hotels with 2,300 rooms, which doesn't really show much of a economic industry in that section of New York City. But in 2012, there were 18 new hotels with 4,000 plus rooms, indicating a much larger economic growth in that area. Now, as well as economic benefits, disaster tourism can also have some educational benefits. Like I said before, disaster tourism creates a special relationship between the tourists, the volunteers, and the locals of the affected area. This is highlighted in the Katrina tours I talked about in New Orleans. During the Katrina tours, tourists were offered the opportunity to view the disaster areas and the disaster sites and debris and the victims, and they eventually realized that these people needed more than tourism money. They needed voluntary labor and they needed help. This inspired a lot of tourists to come out of the woodwork and volunteer and to help clear debris and put people in homes that were displaced from their homes during the hurricane. Now, in the Ryu Rikuzen Takata Japan tour case, it's a little different. A business organization created a tour for students to help out the victims of the Japanese earthquake in Tohoku recover from the disaster. They helped and planned activities for residents, including debris pickup and rebuilding homes. As surprising as it may be, disaster tourism is an industry that can not only economically rejuvenate a community that has just gone through a devastating disaster, but it can provide education and awareness to not only its locals and its citizens, but to the people visiting and to the tourists that want to learn more about the area. Disaster tourism is truly the light at the end of the tunnel.